I remember when I was 10 and I looked at somebody who was 20 and I was like, whoa, when you're 20, you must have it all figured out. And then I got to 20 and I was like, okay, when you're 30, you must have it all figured out. And then I was at 30 and I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever actually have it figured out because I am so not even close. I asked myself the question, I wonder what it's going to take for me to truly feel like a man, because I'm mid-30s and I don't. It's a question that I ask a lot of men, and even men in their 60s. They're just like, I still feel like a boy. I don't truly feel like a man. And this is because in this culture, we don't have a rite of passage. And traditionally, the boy becomes 12, 13, 14 years of age, and he's taken away from community with a group of men. He's put through an ordeal. He is praised and he is integrated within that group. And then he's brought back into society where everybody integrates him in as a different version of himself. So this is his initiation into manhood. And we don't have that. So the world is full of men who are psychologically stuck in boyhood. They are still the immature masculine. And this idea for me of like, okay, nobody's going to do this for me. It's something that I need to do for myself. And I need to figure out how that's going to happen.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. Like many men, Nic Warner eventually reached a point in his life where his only relief came from the act of numbing himself to the burdens of the life he had created, whether through drugs, alcohol, or pornography. Following the breakdown of his marriage, he found himself with only one option left: to confront everything he had been avoiding. What began as a 5-week holiday turned into a 3.5-year journey of healing and self-discovery, traveling across the globe. A decade since that one defining moment, Nic's commitment to personal growth has led him to study a wide range of transformative practices, such as meditation, breathwork, masculine embodiment, traditional indigenous initiation, plant medicine, tantra, and sexual polarity. Through this journey, he recognized the urgent need to address the wounds affecting men, but also the masculine expression that's prevalent in our society today. Nic now dedicates his life to helping men heal and evolve, empowering them towards a sense of clarity, purpose, authenticity, integrity, and confidence. By now, Nic has worked with hundreds of men, guiding them to heal their relationships with themselves and others, rediscover the power of living with a sense of purpose, and embody their unique truth. I've personally been following Nic's work for the past 3 years, and I was immediately struck by the parallels between our journeys of healing and discovery. Both of us encountered similar stepping stones that not only helped us towards a sense of maturity, but also provided us with an embodied understanding of who we are as men. From traveling the world and confronting our deepest fears, to immersing ourselves in various rituals and rites of passage, we both instinctively sought to initiate ourselves into manhood, which became a central focus of our discussion today. In our interview, Nic and I unpack his personal rock bottom moment and the various events leading up to it. He introduces this theme of rites of passage from boyhood to manhood, exploring how the absence of such rituals affects men today, leaving many, well into adulthood, feeling ungrounded in their own sense of manhood. From there, our conversation shifts to the power of men's work. Having both explored a wide array of healing modalities and various forms of men's development, we both inquire into what would truly leave a transformative impact for men today. And finally, we examine the role of relationships and the dysfunction that can arise when we as men have not fully embraced our rightful place as integrated men. In our modern times, where many men feel confused about who they are and their place in the world, I feel that Nic stands out as a strong beacon in the fields of masculine embodiment, rites of passage, sacred intimacy, and polarity, thanks to his deep commitment to his own journey and his cultivated understandings of what truly works. So I'm really excited for you all to dive into this engaging conversation. And now, Let's dive into the show. Welcome back to yet another episode at the Heart of Man. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm incredibly thrilled to be inviting Nic Warner to the podcast today. Nic is a transformative coach and facilitator specializing in men's work, rites of passage work, relationships, intimacy, and plant medicine. Following the breakdown of his marriage, he embarked on a 3.5-year journey of healing and self-discovery. During this time, he explored various transformative modalities, including tantra, neo-tantra, plant medicine, breathwork, meditation, traditional indigenous initiation, and men's work. These experiences led him to recognize the importance of addressing the wounded masculine in society, and his work today is now dedicated to empowering individuals with clarity, purpose, authenticity, and connection. Nic, I welcome you to Heart of Man.
Thank you, Alex. It's great to be here.
Yeah, as I mentioned before we started rolling, I definitely noticed a lot of parallels in our journeys and what led you to the path of discovery. And the place where I'd love for us to begin is the breakdown moment that propelled you on your own path. I would love for you to guide us back to that experience and what led you on a path of exploring travel and exploring as well various different healing modalities. And I'm curious to hear, what was it that was your guiding, let's say, North Star at that time, and what gave you the awareness what the next step ahead is?
Yeah. Well, I guess, I've reflected on this a lot over the past 10 years, and there was a whole lot of little things that kind of added up to me hitting rock bottom. And if I look back on it from that reflective lens, the main piece was I didn't follow my heart in the beginning. So I grew up drawing. Drawing was my love. It was my passion. It was a thing that I would do from a very, very early age and be very good at. And it was the thing that time would just dissolve whenever I'd start drawing. And as I got older and I started to think about what do I want to do beyond high school, at some point my dad said to me, don't do that, you'll never make money from it. Follow the money. And this little piece, this little nugget that he passed on to me, put me on a detour that kind of sent me in one of the most, I think it was about a 15-year wayward journey of rediscovering that after all of that, I should have actually been an illustrator. So that was the first piece. I didn't follow my heart in the beginning. The second piece was I gave my power away to a woman. I gave up my purpose. So I ultimately started studying architecture, and I met my partner at university, and she won a contract to go model in New York. And she's like, hey, do you want to go move to New York? And I was like, sure. And I graduated from architecture school and then moved straight to New York, 2009, middle of the financial crisis. So I was in a very, very beautiful place where I was living back in Australia. Everything was going my way. I was great at what I did. I had great contacts, great networks, and I gave it all up to follow her to New York so she could do her thing. That was the second piece. And because I'd given up my purpose, I couldn't get a visa. There are all of these little pieces that it led me to a path of like, okay, I don't want to feel the reality of what I'm doing. I'm going to start taking drugs. And I went to drink a lot. And, I couldn't afford, I wasn't making any money. I was working for tips at a dive bar. So basically my partner was making the money and bankrolling our entire experience in New York, which is not a cheap thing to bankroll. And I was just taking drugs and playing chess. Basically, that was the way that I'd pass time. So we ultimately moved to Berlin, and not a great place to go if you enjoy taking drugs. So I went there, and life continued, and I started to work full time as an architect, and then realized actually this is not what I want to be doing, and was in a place of like just disenchantment with life because I'd married this incredibly beautiful woman. We had we had a really great life. We had a beautiful apartment. Everything was really on the outside fantastic, and I was deeply unhappy. And the marriage ended up breaking down, and this was the catalyst for me really reflecting on where I was and how I got there, and what did I truly want to do. And again, there was another little experience of life where I'd finally discovered that I should be drawing, that I should be an illustrator. And in the kind of week of that discovery, this company that I was working for offered me, the offer that I couldn't refuse financially. And I was like, I've just discovered that I should be following my heart and I should be drawing, but then there's the money. So just one more time, I'm going to follow the money. And it was a test. And this is what the universe does. It gets you to the point where you figured the test out, and then it tests you again one more time. And I failed the test, and I went for the money, and the company couldn't afford to pay me. So for 6 months, I went without pay. And here I was still using her money, unable to fucking pay for my existence because I was working for free for this company. And ultimately she gave me the ultimatum, and the only thing left to do is for me to follow my heart. And what that is saying is that I need to go and travel and just spend some time alone and think about life, because I was in this crossroads of the woman of my life is about to leave me, and I'm stuck in this career that I hate, and I really don't know what to do. And I've never taken the time by myself to be by myself, to be with myself, and to figure that out. So I decided to go traveling for 5 weeks, and 5 weeks turned into 7.5 months, turned into 3.5 years. And that was the beginning of phase 2, Nic 2.0, I call it.
I'm curious to hear, as you entered Nic 2.0, as you embarked on that, let's say 5-week initially planned travel experience, what did you end up finding during that time that led to 7 months and then 3.5 years ultimately?
The first thing I realized was that the way that I envisioned it was that life was like a whirlpool, and I was at the top of the whirlpool swimming the opposite direction. Complete resistance to the way life was going. Wanting it to go a different direction, wanting it to go the way that I believed that it should. And at some point in that 5-week period, I let go. And I started to go the direction that the whirlpool of life was taking me. And in that period, in that experience of letting go, things started to happen. Little breadcrumbs, little synchronicities where I was like, oh, okay, that is a really bizarre occurrence that just happened the way that, I'm going to follow that. And I had an understanding of synchronicity. I just didn't really know what it meant once you saw it, or once you found it, or once you heard of it. So these really kind of bizarre synchronicities started to happen, and so I just followed them. And the first piece of it, so an example, I was in Tulum and somebody starts talking about a dark room. It's like a dark room. So this is, this is 2015. People are talking about a dark room. I'd never heard of it. And why would you do that? And a couple of days later, I hear somebody else talking about a dark room. And then I hear somebody else talking, and suddenly this is in my field. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to pay attention. And then I met a guy who turned out to become a mentor of mine. And I was telling him that I was going to go to Guatemala and look for ayahuasca. And he's like, dude, go to Peru for that. If you go to Guatemala, do a dark room. And I'm like, why? And he's like, trust me. If you go to Guatemala, do a dark room. So I went there and ended up doing a dark room for 11 days. And in this moment, or in this experience, realized that I have so much healing to do. And I'd planned to go to Guatemala for 2 weeks to Lake Atitlan, which is this really powerful, energetic vortex. Planned to go there for 2 weeks and ended up staying there for 2 months. And I was just like, okay, I'm letting go completely of control. All I'm going to commit to is doing yoga, meditation, and drawing every day that I'm here, every day that I'm traveling. And people would ask me, like, what's your plan? And I'm like, I don't know, actually. I've given up on that. So all I'm going to do is commit to doing the things that excite me and that I love every day. And I'm going to see what happens. And that 5 weeks turned into 7.5 months. And away we went.
Talk to me about what gave you the courage to really let go of the resistance, to actually do the thing that you really want to do. Because, I imagine at the time you were in your early 30s, you've been living this way of being your whole life. And all of a sudden, now we're really coming at a very different way of being where you're ultimately really following exactly what it is that you want to do. So what gave you the courage to do so?
I ran out of options. I had tried the same way, what's that Einstein quote? The definition of crazy is to do the same thing, expecting a different result. And I was doing the same thing my entire life. And I was like, this didn't work. So what if I did something differently? And what if I actually just did the things that really excited me? And at this point, one of the first books I ever read when I was on my spiritual journey, I think it was about 22, 21. And this guy says to me, read the Celestine Prophecy. I'd never heard of it. And it's a very simple book. It's kind of like an Indiana Jones adventure book, but it speaks about energy and synchronicity and all of these things in a very simple way. And one of the things it speaks about is frequency. And I realized that I was living with a very, very low frequency and a very negative frequency. And everything in my life I was creating because I was stuck in this negative frequency. And one of the things that I realized that is, if I do the things that I love every day, it's a form of self-love, and my frequency is actually going to shift. And when my frequency shifts, I'm going to begin to attract things of a higher frequency, and then synchronicities, and then these breadcrumbs from the universe of like, yes, you're going the right way. So this was a very strong, it's kind of like a nod from the universe of like, oh man, you finally get it. You finally understand. And when you begin to follow your heart, the universe begins to give you things that assist you along your journey. And ultimately, another great book is The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And this thing changed my life. I was at a point of staunch resistance to the way life was. And I read that book and it blew my heart wide open. And so ultimately I was in the jungle in Peru, and after 7.5 months, I was ready to come home. Like, I was pretty tired and I'd missed my friends, and I was left with this decision of, do I go home, go back to my marriage, try and make that work, go back to architecture? I had a very beautiful life. I was just deeply unhappy, and maybe that was okay if I just did that. Or the crossroads and the other direction is to give up everything and start again. And giving up everything and starting again scared the absolute shit out of me, because I was 33. All my friends were like deep in their careers with kids and with family. And here I am on the verge of scrapping all of it and just starting over. And in that precise moment of knowing that I needed to follow my heart, but not knowing what that actually meant or how to differentiate, this woman walks past. And I just look at her and say, hey, how do you tell the difference between your head and your heart? And she looks at me without blinking and just smiles and says, you do the thing that scares you the most. And I just fucking wept, because I knew what that meant. And I wasn't ready for it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to just one more time, I'm going to try and make the marriage. I'm going to try and do the thing. And if it's not meant to be, the universe will give me a very clear nudge. And I went home and the universe kicked my ass. I was like, okay, that's it. And I went about this journey of like, all right, this is Nic 2.0 begins now.
Hmm. And it seems like during this journey, like one of the things that seems to have been very transformative has been these, I'm going to call them, various different rites of passages, various different experiences that led to some form of initiatory experience where one version on the beginning, and then ultimately you came out as another version on the other side. And I want to hear a little bit more about these rites of passages that you pursued and explored, whether it was the darkness retreat, whether it was plant medicine. I even heard that you did the Lakota Sundance, which I'm definitely very interested in. But reason why I believe this is going to be really valuable for a lot of the men listening in is it's definitely as well been a big part of my own journey. I mean, I've done a darkness retreat myself, Vision Quest. I've explored various different plant medicines as well in my own life. And for me, what I noticed was there was just this deep yearning inside to be initiated. And I didn't even know what I was looking for, but it felt like a very primal instinct inside of me. Something in me wanted to mature. Something in me wanted to step into manhood. And yet I didn't really know how, right? And it seemed like these experiences, these curated experiences where I could step and lean into, where the space was held by somebody else, they gave me the opportunity to really do or be exposed to what I had to look at or work through. And I must say, after each of these individual experiences, it really did feel like there was another version of me that came out on the other side. So, a long-winded way for me to kind of guide you into the question, but I want to hear a little bit more about this idea of rites of passages and where those came in for you.
Great question. I remember when I was 10 and I looked at somebody who was 20 and I was like, whoa, when you're 20, you must have it all figured out. And then I got to 20 and I was like, fuck, okay, when you're 30, you must have it all figured out. And then I was at 30 and I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever actually have it figured out because I am so not even close. And I was on this journey and I kind of asked myself the question, I wonder what it's going to take for me to truly feel like a man, because I'm mid-30s and I don't. And it's a question that I ask a lot of men, and even men in their 60s, they're just like, I still feel like a boy. I don't truly feel like a man. And this is because in this culture, we don't have a rite of passage. And traditionally, the boy becomes 12, 13, 14 years of age, and he's taken away from community with a group of men. He's put through an ordeal. He is praised and he is integrated within that group, and then he's brought back into society where everybody integrates him in as a different version of himself. And it is through this process that everybody treats him differently. So this is his initiation into manhood. And we don't have that. So the world is full of men who are psychologically stuck in boyhood. And these men start wars and they run countries, and they are still children. They are still the immature masculine. And this idea for me of like, okay, nobody's going to do this for me. It's something that I need to do for myself. And I need to figure out how that's going to happen. So I started to follow the resistance and the fear of like, what's the thing that I actually don't want to do? And I'm going to do that. So I went through a whole lot of different typical initiations for some societies or some cultures. But it really depends on who you are and where you're at. And I think what the first initiation I ever did, or the first wasn't really an initiation, but rites of passages come in many different colors. Like getting married is a rite of passage. Having your 21st birthday in Australia is a rite of passage. There are all of these quote unquote rites of passages. And for me, the first noticeable one was when I went traveling when I was 20. And I went to Europe with some mates and I came back home and I felt different. I just felt like a new version of me, and everybody else that I came home to was exactly the same. And they all treated me like I was exactly the same. And I was just like, I'm not this person anymore. I don't want to be this person anymore. So I ultimately left home and kind of moved to a different state. But that was the first real indication of what happens when we go on our individual journeys and we go through these rites of passages of life, and we come back and we're not integrated back into society as a different person. One of the most common things for men, or for boys, is they grow up, they go through life, they become men in their own way, but their father still sees them as a boy because he hasn't gone through his own rite of passage. So he hasn't stepped up the ladder. Even though you might have stepped up, you're still below him on the ladder. So if you look at a rites of passage as a stage of life that goes up and up and up, then you have boy, adolescent, man, father, elder, ancestor, and there are various other things in between. But if you step up into manhood, you can't go above your father until he kind of energetically sees you as a man himself. So traditionally, that's why the parents would either do their own rite of passage, or they would at least acknowledge that the boy has come back from his rite of passage and then treat him differently. So this was a really powerful moment for me when I actually unknowingly put my father through his own rite of passage, where we took mushrooms together. And this opened his mind to see me not as the little boy, but actually as a man and as a friend and as a son, but all of it at the same time, which deeply changed our relationship and deeply changed the way that we communicate and the connection that we have. But it wasn't until I was 39 and when I actually did a Sundance, and that was the moment where I was like, fuck, okay, I feel like a man.
There's definitely one moment that really stuck out for me when you spoke of, this arc of initiation, and spoke as well to the different pillars that are absolutely essential. I contemplate on these experiences that I had when I was traveling, right? When I would spend years away, and I would as well be backpacking in Australia and New Zealand, and I would be living there for years, and I would come back very similarly to you, feeling like a different person, feeling like I've changed, and not being recognized as such. How incredibly painful that was. And very similarly to you, it definitely did not give me a genuine desire to want to stay there, because I didn't want to be that person anymore. That I didn't want to be the guy that I was projected on to be. I want to grow. I wanted to explore deeper growth. And so with that, I recognized, okay, the only thing I can do is go away, right? But within that, I also see that there is not really a solution that is found in that, right? The point that you made around the father needing to ultimately energetically recognize his own son as a man, that one hits, man. And there is a curiosity for me. It seemed like you had that, unbeknownst to you, that initiatory experience. And I do wonder how we can create that. And, just selfishly as well, speaking of myself in this moment.
I had this experience with my father when I think I was about 32, maybe. And we were traveling Nepal, the whole family, and my sister's a psychologist and she's younger, but he trusts her more, or at the time he trusted her more because she ticked the boxes that he was kind of hoping I would tick. So I tried to convince him to take some mushrooms with us, and he was very adamant that it's not something he's going to do. He'll happily drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes at the time, but she managed to convince him that mushrooms is probably a good idea. And the very solid, very opaque cube that he was living in dissolved, and he suddenly saw life in a whole new way. And from that point on, we had a very beautiful relationship. And it wasn't until I got into men's work where people would say, and I get this a lot with clients, it's like, how's your relationship with your father? It's like, yeah, fantastic. It's like, yeah, but how was it when you were a child? And I kind of suppressed it. or just forgot about it because it wasn't fantastic and it wasn't great. And because of men's work, I ended up figuring out how to have these conversations with him. And it's very common for guys in our generation to be, oh no, my father won't have those conversations. He's not ready. He's not able. He's not. And we project our shit onto him. Whereas most parents, and it's true, it's not all of them, but most parents want to have these conversations. They want to heal the relationship with their children. They just don't have the tools. So they weren't born in a generation where 24-hour access on our phones to therapists and men's groups and all of these things. We are the ones that have been gifted that. So we have the tool set, and if we don't, we should. We have the tool set to be able to have these conversations with our parents. And probably 7 out of 10 times, the response I get from clients is, oh, fuck, they actually wanted to have that conversation. He was ready for it. He actually instigated it. I just had to open the space for it. And this is what happened with my father. I was like, I told a bunch of people that I was going to have the conversation because I had to leave back to Europe the next day. And I got myself all psyched to have this conversation with him. And I went and kind of by telling other people, I made myself accountable that I wouldn't skip out on it. And I went and began to have the conversation, and he did it. He was the one who's like, I wish I was there for you kids, like I'm going to be there for my grandkids. And this opened up just some of the deepest conversations we'd ever had. And I then asked him how his relationship was with his parents, because I never knew and I never cared to ask. And I just assumed that the way that he raised me wasn't the way that I needed it to be, so therefore he's wrong, rather than, fuck, what if that was the only way he knew how? And through these conversations, I started to understand how he was raised, and the compassion that came through that understanding was like, fuck, man, he did the best he could. So the moment that this conversation began, at some point we started to hug it out. I could literally feel the intergenerational trauma just dissolve. Like it was just this deeply profound moment of life. So to answer your question, create the space. Get curious as to his life and where he comes from and how he became the man he became, and what was his relationship like with his parents, and really just from a space of curiosity, open this space for him to share, because it is through that you'll find some deep healing.
I love that. And yeah, I noticed I felt very touched, just by what you said. And I noticed as well, it gave me that sense of responsibility, because you're right. I do have these tools that they never had. I had access to things, to growth, to transformation, to healing that they never had. And ultimately, they were the ones who gave me those opportunities. They were ultimately an immigrant family that grew up in Germany. They worked hard to give me the life that they never had, growing up in poverty in Russia. And so with that, there's a beautiful recognition. Oh, like I get to actually support them with this, right? And if I reflect upon your words that they really want to have these conversations, I can definitely see that. And yet at the same time, I recognize how I have projected upon them that they're maybe not able to, they're not capable to do it. There's a language barrier. Like all of these things were coming up. And so with that has kept us, distant. That has kept us far away from each other. Just within that, like the only thing I could do was do my own healing work on my family from far away, but it never gave me the sense of connection that I really wanted. Nic, I want to comment a moment here on what you said around the Lakota Sundance, and this being a moment where you truly felt like a man for the first time.
Yeah.
Could you bring us to that moment, and could you share with us what happened that ultimately led to that experience, and how would you describe that transition from, I'm going to say, boyhood in that moment and that genuine experience? Okay, now I'm really a man.
It's something that I'd heard about for years, and I wasn't ready for it. It wasn't in my field of like, okay, let's do this. And it was something that was in my awareness, but something that I'd very confidently and very staunchly just said, I'm not, I'm a hard no. And I did a vision quest, and I found that there was a lot of fear around not eating and not drinking for 4 days. And I realized through that process that I'd had an eating disorder growing up, where I would be at the table based on the fact that I'd be at the table with my dad and my brother and, sister and mother. But if I didn't eat quick enough, there'd be no food left. So this was something that I learned. I kind of told myself I have to eat, and I have to eat quickly. And this led me to this idea that if I don't eat, I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to be hungry. And this was a story that I told myself my entire life that I didn't really realize. And then the fear of not eating or drinking for 4 days was just overwhelming. And I did this vision quest, and it was fine. I wasn't hungry. Sure, I could have drunk, but I didn't need to. And I was like, wow, the mind is a really powerful tool to convince us of things that actually are complete bullshit. And it was at the end of this experience where there are all these men around covered in these scars. And I'm like, what the fuck? Why would you do that more than once? And the scars are from the Sundance. And they just looked at me and smiled and were like, trust me, when you do it, you realize. And I kind of laughed. I was like, there is no way I'm going to do that. And a few months later, I led a retreat in Portugal, and there was a brother there that did the Temescal. And after the Temescal around a fire, he said to me, you should come dance. I was like, dude, there's no way I'm doing that. And he said, I'll send you the information. And so I'm reading this PDF that he sent me, and in it says, traditionally, invitation came by word of mouth after Temescal around the fire. It's like, oh, fuck, that's exactly how he asked me. And I took that as a sign. And I was actually in EMLT in one of John's programs, and sitting across from this mate who I'd kind of just got to know through the program. I said, hey, what do you think about doing a Sundance? And he's like, oh, fuck, you're the third person this week to mention it. And I was like, yes, because I knew that's what that meant. And it turns out that his partner was going to be in Russia the same week, and he was going to be in Portugal with nothing to do the same week that it was on. So it just,
wow.
Yeah, the stars aligned magnificently. So we ended up going to this Sundance together, and I'd never been more scared of really anything.
Can you explain to us what the Sundance is, just to give as well a bit of a scene for our listeners?
So a sweat lodge or a Temescal is a space. It's about, it's about 3.5 meters in diameter, and there are a bunch of hot stones in the middle, and you sit in there in complete darkness with a bunch of men for an extended period of time, and you sweat, and it gets incredibly fucking hot, made more so by the fact that there can be anywhere from 10 to 50 men in the same space. There's nowhere to sit. You're squashed up, skin on skin, sweating, singing, chanting. It's an experience. And depending on the culture and depending on who leads it, these things can really bring you to your knees, quite literally. It's to the point of like, I may die. And so these happen sunrise and sunset. You wake up at sunrise, they blow the conch, you wake up at sunrise, you go in and you sweat. And then over the course of the day, there are 7 rounds of dancing. And each round can go anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half, 2 hours, where you just dance. And you dance in formation and you pray. And the entire experience is, which I didn't understand, is a huge prayer. And it is an incredibly powerful prayer that has ultimately changed my life in the most powerful ways, and the most beautiful ways. So you wake up at sunrise, you sweat, you dance, you sweat, you go to bed. You wake up at sunrise, you sweat, you dance, you sweat, you go to bed. You do this for 4 days. And you do the whole thing without food, without water. And
Fuck.
It's intense. And the first year we did it, there was 90 men dancing. Well, there's 90 dancers. There was maybe 20 women in this tradition. The women dance as well. And it really pushes you to your limit. It pushes your mind to the limit, pushes your body. And there was it got to 30. It was about 32 degrees. It was the middle of August in Portugal. So 32 degrees Celsius was kind of the lowest it was. Got up to 34 at this point. And by day 2, men were just dropping. They were just fainting from the heat and from the exhaustion. And it's not like they give you water when you faint. They just slap you in the face. Oh, you good? Yeah, get up. You're fine. And it was done. It was the 4th day, and I'm a bit of a mess at this point, and I'm kind of just moping. The sun is pounding down, but the music. They have this giant drum, and they had about 8 men sitting around it, all just banging this drum, and they have anywhere between 6 to 12 women standing behind them, and they're all singing these songs and these chants and these prayers. And the whole time they're like, the music gives you power, the sun gives you power. And I'm standing there, and this last formation is that you're facing the singers and you're dancing and they're singing. And I'm just in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm so thirsty, I'm so tired. And I'm just like, this is a story that is just kind of on loop. And then there's a little part of me that comes up and says, yeah, but fuck, what if you're not? Like, what if the music is giving you power and the sun is giving you power? And what if you're just telling yourself a fucking story? And what if you stopped? And suddenly I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not tired. I've got fucking energy. And I am getting, and it was almost like I was back in my Berlin days at a rave. Like I was just going for it, and I was like, this is amazing. And at the end of it, I stood there, and the final chant finished, that everybody starts to cheer, and I just fucking started crying, and I was like, that was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever been through. And the fact that there was so much fear behind it, and I did it anyway.
Okay.
And I didn't just do it and kind of struggle across the finish line. Like, I fucking crushed it. And the insights that had come, and the transformation of that one little insight that just changed everything. And it's like, I can do fucking anything. And that was the moment of, like, this is the first time in my life where I truly feel like a man.
Wow. Yeah, beautiful, brother. Yeah, thanks for sharing that story as well with such depth and detail. And yeah, I'm noticing as well the desire in me just to maybe bring language of like, why are such experiences so potent? Why is it that these type of experiences, I'm going to say especially as men, lead us to an experience of, feeling like a man or feeling powerful? And, I mean, I can try, but I don't think it really, I don't think it does justice to actually the embodied experience of it. But I see that there's, just this immense value in us pursuing these experiences of deep fear and having the ability to come out on the other side of it. And it also really seems like you had this, I'm going to say moment, this transcendental moment where you were able to step beyond all the things that must have been very valid on the fourth day of a Sundance, where you did feel thirsty, you did feel hungry, you did feel tired, all of that, but you were able to work with it and able to access the energy that was still there despite all of that, right? And I imagine that there was an experience that you had within all of that that really made you understand how powerful you really are and what you could really do. And it does really seem to me that the masculine psyche, if you want to call it that, is really hunting or seeking for such experiences, seeking for that experience of power, seeking for that experience of what it is that we're capable of, and feeling as well the freedom that can come from that on the other side.
Yeah, there's definitely something that John Wineland has spoken about. I'm not sure if it came through David Data, but the idea that the masculine grows through challenge and the feminine grows through praise. And yeah, it's great to receive praise. It's great to receive a pat on the back and all of these things, but there's a part of us as men that grows through challenge. And one of the greatest issues that we have in society is that we have become so comfortable. And everything is just, we can sit on the couch with the thermometer at the perfect temperature. We can order food. We don't have to do anything. And we've become fat and lazy and soft and weak and sick. And there's a part of us deep down, almost archetypal, that is like, I need to push myself to the next level to see how far I can go. And that part of me did not exist for probably the first 30 odd years. And that was why my life was such a fucking shambles. And when it woke up with a vengeance. It's like, all right, I'm going to do all of the things that I've kind of deep down wanted to do, but I've been too scared to.
Well, I would love for us to transition a little bit more into this conversation around men and masculinity. And I guess a good place for us to start is, after you've been on this journey of discovery and exploring all these diverse modalities, I've heard you say that men's work was really the common thread amongst all of them that was really missing for you. I want to hear, what is it about men's work that really was the missing link? And what would you say was the value that you received from it that you didn't get from other modalities?
There's a deep, authentic, clear, sharp space that can help bring clarity and alignment into the lives of men. And from my experience and the experience I know of many men, we don't trust men. I grew up, I was beaten, bashed, betrayed, abused. And I was like, fuck this. Why would I want to be friends with men? Why would I want to be that close to men that are just going to hurt me? So I grew up the nice guy shadow. I grew up not wanting to be the inverted commas toxic masculine, not wanting to be one of these men. So I'm going to be more of the nice guy, and I'm going to get rid of all of the quality, all of the really healthy quality traits of masculinity because I don't understand it. And I'm just going to become friends with women. I'm going to be a people pleaser. I'm going to be all of these other things because I don't understand masculinity. I don't understand what healthy masculinity is. I don't understand how necessary it is and how beautiful it is. So I spent my entire life in the in this kind of passive shadow of masculinity, which led me to ground zero. It led me to kind of rock bottom. And finding men's work, I discovered that actually men are fantastic. And being around good men is one of the most beautiful, healing, powerful things you can do. And it completely shifted my life. And I was like, fuck, man, if I had good men, like, I mean, I had great friends, but if I had good, solid men that would call me out of my shit back when I was married, like, dude, why are you living this way? Why are you not finding purpose? Why are you in this relationship with? Why are you allowing this culture to exist in your relationship? What are you doing with the drugs and the drinking and the porn? Like, if I had men to call me out on that shit, my life would have gone a very different route. And, ultimately it needed to go the way that it did. And I found men's work, and all of the things that I did, the meditation, the breathwork, the plant medicine, the fucking dark rooms, all of this stuff, if I'd had good men in my life the entire step of the way, that probably wouldn't have been something that I would have desperately needed to find, because I would have had men to kind of help lead me there. So it really fundamentally shifted everything for me, and has saved me and has kind of created a really beautiful life for me.
Yeah. I can definitely attest to that as well in my own experience. I mean, just recognizing that I've been on a path of growth now for the last, I'm going to say as well, like around 8 years, and exploring meditation and yoga and breath work quite extensively. I could see that what was lacking for me was the relational piece, but then I went into tantra and it had some of that, but simultaneously what was really missing for me was the connection, the relationship to other men, and as well the man inside of me that I have abdicated, that I have completely disregarded, because very similarly to you, I had the, nice guy shadow. And so with that, there was all these various different qualities, such as my assertiveness, my anger, the shame, my sexuality, grief, all of these aspects. There was some form of understanding around it due to my relationship to masculinity or maleness that led me to have a very dysfunctional relationship to all these different aspects. And so leaning into men's work, leaning into connection and relationship to other men as well gave me a deep opportunity here as well to really work on all those different aspects. So what I want to hear from you, Nic, is I want to hear, what do you see as this, like when we speak about this idea of conscious masculinity, like what would you describe it as? Because as I see it, there's all these various different types of men's work, and they're all great. And they're all needed to some regard, right? Some are more directed towards, I'm going to say, the warrior archetype, or exploring, challenging oneself physically, and maybe overriding any form of reactivity so we can stay and remain present. Others are more about opening up the heart space and really leading more from that place, and let's call it the lover archetype. So and with that, I see that we have these strong opposing poles with sometimes very conflicting messages. And I see that there's truth on both ends, but often what is missed is the nuance in between. And so here I want to speak a little bit more about what is it that you see around this idea of conscious masculinity, and where can, both of these extremes, let's say, meet each other more harmoniously? Big question, I know.
Beautiful question. It's and it's kind of a result of a few things. Like, basically up until the last 80 years, men were the providers and the protectors. We're talking hundreds of thousands of years, men have provided and protected. Since the 60s, basically, with the second wave feminism coming through. Only since then, men have started to women have kind of taken over more of a providing role. Men were requested to be softer, more sensitive, more emotional because of this, the reality of the stoic masculine that came through Great Depression, World War One, World War Two. You know, the world was riddled with trauma, and men have basically existed on Earth to numb themselves from the reality that they need to kill to survive and to protect. So imagine, the DNA that exists within us has lived for so long as I don't want to feel more deeply because I need to kill something or somebody else for my own safety, for the safety of my family, to protect the tribe, whatever it is. And then suddenly reality shifts a little bit, and it's like, we need you to feel more. We actually need you to be more sensitive. We need you to be more emotional. And the pendulum swung from this kind of stoic masculine all the way over to this nice guy of guys who like, okay, fuck, I don't want to be like that. So as we discussed, I'm going to be the more passive in reality. I'm going to be the passive shadow of masculinity. And there is confusion now around what is a man's role. And because of that, because women are very capable of providing and doing all of these things, for many men, it's like, well, fucking, what do I do? And, based on the reality that for so many thousands of years, we had a role that was very clearly defined. So men's work has come up, and it's like, one part of men's work is, okay, we need to tap into the more emotional parts of ourselves. We need to feel more. We need to express more, which, yes, it's valid. And the other part is, no, we need to be the protectors because the world has gone in this direction. Weak men create hard times. We are in hard times, and it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. So there is a lot of truth to the fact that men need to find more of their spine, and they need to find more of their heart. And in the middle, there is that nuance of truth. The thing with Instagram and with people go off and doing a workshop or having a plant medicine experience or whatever it is, suddenly everybody's a coach and everybody wants to teach the thing that they've just experienced because it's changed their lives. And they don't have a truly deep, fundamental, embodied experience of the teachings. So they teach whatever it is that changed them. And the reality that has brought up is that most men's work is actually just feminine practice. So what I mean by that is the feminine is experience. The feminine is expression. The feminine is that which is always changing. The masculine is the space in which it all exists, the awareness of all of it. So one of the realities, and I've had conversations with women that are like, I don't want a fucking guy that does men's work because he's an emotional mess and I have to be the masculine pole in the relationship. And because a guy goes off to a men's retreat and then suddenly he learns how to cry, and then all of a sudden all of this expression comes out, and then he comes back to his partner and she becomes his therapist because he's this in touch, vulnerable man. And this is also part of my issue with the whole neo-tantra community, because I also went that path first. There's no grounded masculine depth in that. It's just a bunch of spiritual fuckboys who know how to speak to women to get laid.
Agreed.
And the piece in the middle is consciousness. The masculine depth, the consciousness, the expansion and the space that it all exists within. And so basically any practice that you go to at a men's work retreat, unless there is a nuanced instruction of how to become the awareness of it, it's just feminine practice. And it's just putting men more and more into their expression and into their experience. And ultimately, it's doing a disservice to their partners if they can't tell the difference or if they're not taught the difference.
I do see the incredible value in this conversation and really as well illuminating that, because let's just say I've been in men's work for the last 4 years and as well been exploring tantra for the last 2. And what I've often observed is it's interesting because these practices were important for me. And there was a stage where that was absolutely required. But I recognized if I only stay in that way of expressing myself, ultimately what I'm doing is damaging my relationships. And so I had to ultimately as well look in between, what is the missing thread here, right? And so thankfully at that time as well, I was already very involved in the work, that John brings into the world, Eli Buren, Amir Khaligi, and they gave me an understanding, there is also this understanding of the masculine principle, which can allow us to contain or to witness the experience, but not be fully immersed in it, right? And coming from a background of meditation and, Vipassana, I think that was definitely something that was very helpful for me, to really as well make that switch back, still go into expression when it's needed, but recognize it's just one note. It's just one way of expressing oneself. And at the same time, recognizing kind of the, I'm going to say, more arrested nature that I want to come from. With that, I think this could be a really good, valuable place for us to transition a little bit around the challenges that can occur in relationship. And when you were as well answering this question around conscious masculinity, you spoke of this idea that, when a man starts entering this type of work, that he does become, I'm going to say, more expressive, or let's say he becomes a bit more connected to the feminine principle. Yeah. And so naturally, if we just follow kind of the laws of polarity, naturally the feminine will have to then hold the masculine pole. So what occurs is ultimately a reverse of polarity. And I see that this is often the case, especially with a lot of individuals who actually don't even know much about these teachings. And it's just something that they naturally fall into. So I would love for you to expand a little bit on what is it that you see that is leading to these dynamics, and how can as well an individual come or step away, let's say, from those dynamics and actually come more back into the energetic that they feel most identified with?
It's a great question. You can do an entire podcast on this topic.
Maybe we'll need to do that another time.
So once I began to understand polarity, I realized why all of my relationships had ever failed. Because I really was very comfortable holding the feminine pole within my relationships. This stems from wounding. So if you look at, every human has masculine, feminine energy within them. And depending on the arc of the couple, one has more masculine, one has more feminine, the greater the arc of sexual desire. It doesn't matter who holds which pole. So the man can hold more feminine, the woman can hold more masculine, that's fine. As long as they don't remain within that pole, if it is not their natural essence. So if you have a woman who is naturally more feminine, but she's holding the masculine pole more in the relationship constantly, and there's no kind of reprieve from that, you're going to start to build resentment within the relationship. The arc of polarity will begin to diminish, and you're going to have either kind of a sexless relationship, or you're going to be best friends, and it's very loving, but there's no intimacy. So often what I see, this comes from one of the most common dynamics comes from a guy that is a mummy's boy. And he grew up where he didn't really trust men. His father might have been emotionally avoidant, so he's very connected to his mother. She becomes the feminine, his mother is the feminine in his life that he can kind of rely on to be his emotional support. As he grows up, he meets a woman who typically has a father wound, or at least she doesn't trust the masculine. So she's going to look for a man that she can control because she's going to feel safer. So then she meets a mummy's boy and she can control him, which is great. And it makes her feel good because she feels safer. And he's like, fuck yeah. And my partner now becomes from my mum, and she's going to do my dishes and wash my clothes and do all these things, not out of in service to her king, but out of I need to take care of him because he can't take care of himself. So then suddenly this will feel great for a little bit because you're both having your needs met. But at some point, she's going to start to resent him because men are useless. And he's going to start to resent her because all women are controlling. And then the polarity is going to diminish and they're going to resent each other. And then this is what happens in a lot of relationships. And then what perpetuates it is the woman often is the one that tries to fix the relationship. But trying to fix anything is a very masculine thing. So then she's trying to fix it by recreating the problem that's causing it in the first place, which is a flipped polarity. So a lot of this is, yes, there's a lot you can do as a couple to heal this and to have awareness of this, but a lot of it is self-work and it's self-reflection and it's going to men's groups, going to women's groups. It is getting a therapist by yourself. It is figuring out your own wounding. Firstly, so you can kind of help the other in relationship, but also what you might find is that once you heal that part of yourself, you've outgrown the relationship. And it might be that you need to move on once you've healed that part of yourself because the person that you're in relationship with is actually not the person that you need to be with anymore. But again, this is very much self-work that's required to kind of come to this understanding.
Mm. Have you ever seen individuals actually work through it together?
A lot of the clients that come to me and come to the retreats that I lead and through my business, they come from their partners. Their partner's like, look, this is not going to last if you don't figure your shit out. And then the men will come and will kind of get to the essence of what it is, and they have an awareness of how they have been within relationship. And it will start to shift. And then suddenly they'll come home as a new man, or they'll be in relationship as a different energetic. And then it also takes part of the woman to kind of really, where can I let go of control? Where can I not need to make those decisions? Where can I let him plan? Where can I release the need to be the one that does the thing? And then when you both work on it together, it's naturally you can come into really beautiful resonance and polarity, and yeah, I've seen it happen quite a lot.
What do you wish men would know about relationships and the feminine that ultimately would set them up for success in the relational realm?
The greatest tool you can have in relationship, in sex, in conversation, is presence. Embodied presence. I've used this example a few times just because it blew my fucking mind, but I was lying in bed with my partner. Lights were out. I was holding her. My eyes were closed. And she says, "Come back to me." And like, what? She's like, "Come back to me. You drifted off." And she was right. I was like, how the fuck did you feel? Women feel 1,000 times more deeply than men realize. And we think we're so smart. And, we hide things and we don't say things, and we sit there and we're thinking about something else while we're looking at that, and they feel it. And they feel it all. And because they feel it all, it's so easy to lose trust in us. And we think we're the most trustworthy men in the world, and they can just feel right through it. So embodied presence is the absolute tool that everybody every man should bring and should practice and should work diligently at deepening.
What do you see as the distinction between embodied presence and presence alone?
I feel embodied presence is a transmission that occurs naturally, whereas anybody can be present. You know, you sit, you don't seek, you look into a partner's left eye and and now I'm thinking about something else. Whereas embodied presence is more of a transmission of like, well, man, this guy is really deep. And you spoke about Eli and Amir and John. You get in their presence, like you get near them and you can feel it. You can feel men like this who have practiced for many years, who have a depth and a depth of transmission that is noticeable. And for me, that is embodied presence.
Yeah, I love that. It's deeply felt through their bodies. And ultimately, they don't have to say much or even do much, but just simply them feeling themselves fully and transmitting that, it definitely leaves an incredibly strong impact. All right, Nic, I think this is a really good time for us to slowly start winding down with the conversation. It's been absolutely, an honor to have this conversation. Thank you for coming on, Nic. It was definitely a great pleasure to riff off of these topics that, we both love just so much. So
thank you for having me.
Where can our listeners find you? And is there anything that you would like to bring our listeners an awareness of?
So we have a 5-month program with a men's group that I am a part of called 13 Pints. And that is an incredibly powerful masculine leadership program where we have an in-person event in the beginning and an in-person event at the end. And one of the most powerful things I've ever been a part of. And other than that, there'll be little workshops and things coming up. I'm about to, 6 to 8 weeks is about when I'm going to be a father. So everything else is going to be kind of a little more spontaneous at that point.
Yeah, would definitely love to have you back on, Nic, to speak about that and speak as well about your journey. Thank you all for checking in. I hope you got a lot of value out of this conversation with Nic and I. In case you want to share it with your friends, please do so. And if you want to tag us as well on your socials and share this conversation with anybody, that would absolutely be appreciated. And until next time, thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.